Went from hands on the wheel to hands on my thigh, to hands on my body in the back of the Porsche. I'm in love with your fingertips. I reminisce places you kiss, girl, it's been too long. And when you rock them short nails, that's low-key sentimental. Now keep them cut though, so there ain't no incidentals. And I love them tattoos, I still gotta learn them all. So gonna make them the writings on my wallet.
Thank you for tuning in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You're listening to Pleasure Moody Joy, and I'm your host, Faye Goddess. Today we're talking about the imagination as adults, and we're going to talk about some of the good things, bad things, the things that are a little sexy, aka this is for adults, and how creativity and imagination is in there. Plus a few tips about scheduling that into your normal schedule and making sure that's important. So it's more like to highlight it, right? Like, okay, why is this important? Why is this a thing? And so now I should get to our sponsors, which is Arrangements by Chris and the Pleasure Moody Joy brand. So, getting back to what we're discussing today, imagination, right? I was thinking about how when I've done BDSM as like, I'm doing this all the time, I'm going to dungeons, I'm speaking to the people, networking, whatever it is, hanging out with subs, doing dom stuff. I noticed there's this kind of creative mindset to wow or shock your subs, right? Like, you want to make sure that they're having a good time. And so then you also need to think about, like, okay, they have hard limits, so never do that. Soft limits, you got to bring it up first, and it's rare. So, there should be some type of communication around that. But otherwise, what are the things that they like versus they dislike? And how do you want to sprinkle it through your scene? So a lot of times when I do a scene, I don't think about it. I just do it. Stuff happens. But beforehand, I always come up with bullet points to what are some things I want to do. And so the reason why I do this is because if I write down 6 things, I might only do 3 of them. But I'm not thinking about the detail oriented behind it. I'm just thinking, okay, we might do a little bit of that. And then plus it just helps in the back of my mind what I'm doing. And then also I leave it somewhere close. So if I ever want to pick it up, if I have a moment like, what do I do now? Because you are in control. And that's the funny thing about when you're in control of someone else or your own life, you have to come up with the rules. And as people, we don't like to admit it, but the masses don't really like creating their own rules. That's why they do what other people tell them to do. Because it is a lot of brain power to think about policies and rules. And I'm a person that in certain political organizations I've been in, I like being part of policy because it kind of fascinates me. Like, rules are interesting to me, not like I need to always necessarily follow them, but why do we come up with the rule? And then how do you bring up exceptions and things like that. So I'd be all in it. So I was thinking even parameters or categories that we come up with stuff, the basic units of that is communication. And so we have words to say this thing, so you don't have to go pick it up and point it to it, I can just tell you, oh yeah, I need to get a cactus or something, right? I don't have to go, because then I could have just went and got it myself if I have to show you. So that's why I use the words, right? So terminology for different clubs, education, and all kinds of things in between. All of it is just so we can communicate, right? And so I was thinking about how that's why in like BDSM, there's that creativity where some people might really like humiliation. They want people to like say bad or mean things about them. But I remember when I first got into doming, I couldn't just like say mean stuff to people like off rip. I was just like, I don't do that because mine is from trauma. Like, I got bullied. I'm good at telling people off because they made me angry. You know what I mean? Or they was really trying to mess with me. But I was like a Daria in school. So it was more sarcastic and mean versus like really trying to whatever. Unless you really came for me and I thought that I could get away with, you know, dealing with you as an opponent, right? Because I would just say some stuff. And so I was thinking about, like, as an adult, I'm like, oh, well, now I'm happy and stuff or whatever. I don't need that, you know, and I want to always draw from, like, trauma. But, like, that would probably be a thing that maybe isn't talked about a lot, especially with doms. We're really good at, like, keeping stuff close to the chest. And it makes sense now why I want to talk about it, because I remember when learning a lot about BDSM, listening to different podcasts, like read and skimmed a few books, went to the things, you know, went to some events. And what was always really helpful that other doms would explain to me is like, you're not perfect, so you're going to make mistakes, but try to make sure they're not ones that will permanently hurt someone. And just make sure you get all the what could permanently hurt someone down of don't do that. The rest of it, you'll learn as you go. And talking with your sub really helps you tailor what you're doing differently, so then like issues or hiccups don't happen in the future. So like when someone's newly a dom, sometimes people are a little worried to play with them because they don't know all the things, right? Like they won't know when, like sometimes subs go into like sub frenzy, like space, and they can't say no. They're gonna just be like, yeah, keep going, and you have to call it. And I feel like this happens a lot with people who are like super masochistic. Not all subs are, but people who really like pain, they will get to this like endorphin moment, which actually makes complete sense, like biologically too. Like because you're being hurt so much, your body like sends happy things, you know, happy molecules through your body. Let's say it like that. That's like the simplest way I can say it, right? Like, so they're riding off that high, like a runner's high. And so sometimes they're not going to be like, yeah, I probably need to stop because like I already have enough bruises at this point or something, especially like impact play. And so I remember, like, that's why I like dungeons. There's like dungeon masters and people around there, so they can like also call it if you are doing too much. But so luckily I've never had to have that happen or anything. But like, and most places I've been to, that doesn't normally happen. Like most people get mentored or do stuff, they be knowing what they're doing. Like I feel like most people know. So that always made me feel nice about those spaces. But anyways, getting back to the imagination. I remember like I did one time, I was at a dungeon and there was a part where I started to play this game with them, and I took some stuff out of my purse and put them around the room, and then I tied their hands together and put a blindfold on the person and had them just like try to find the things in the room. And so if they were close to something, I would say hot or cold, and that was normally the game. But because people were there, I was like, oh, do you know that old like millionaire show, like anyways, where you tried to get the money, you ask the questions. So I remember they had you can ask the audience. So I was like, oh, audience, can you help this poor sad sub, you know, blah blah blah. Like went on this whole thing, was having a bunch of fun with like now incorporating the people, because I had got a crowd going from some other stuff I was doing earlier. And so it was just really fun, like all the people and the energy and things like that. And I just came up with that on the spot, right? And so I started thinking about like how BDSM things where it's LARPing. Like, I almost got into a LARPing troupe one time, and I was noticing like how BDSM and LARPing, like, they're both like, you create a character and then you are that character, and then we're going to go out into the real world and pretend to do it. Like, LARPers will get swords out and be the characters of a game or be the characters of whatever and have points, and it's like a whole thing. Instead of you playing it on your computer, let's just go outside and act it out. And so people wouldn't think of that as like acting, but it is. In BDSM, we call it scenes. It's hilarious to me. So when I was like, yeah, creativity is just so important. Like, as children, we have pretend play, and this is one of those moments where I'm like, oh, this is why I used to love Abraham Hicks and the whole pretend like you have the thing you want, or the whatever you're trying to manifest, or the life you're trying to manifest. Try to spend like 24 hours as if you were in that lifestyle or whatever. And one day I was like, oh my gosh, she's telling us to pretend play as adults. Because when you pretend play as a child, when I was taking developmental psychology, which is all about like how we form as humans from babies. And so it's really interesting. Babies are so cool. Like, I didn't know, like, at that point I wasn't like super into babies. I was like, keep away. But after I took that class, I remember being like, man, they are doing a lot. Like, their vision, it takes a while to come in. There's all kinds of like how much information their little brains are taking in. They are getting snaps, of everybody, everything. It is so interesting. Anyways, so what I notice is, like, as people, like, we take in all this information all the time, and how we express our individuality is by picking your collage of things that make you you, and all the roles and games and plays that you're in are acted out and expressed by like what you want to keep and what you want to do and what you do and what you don't do sometimes. If it's like you used to do something you don't. And so I wasn't doing a lot of BDSM stuff. I was taking a mental break from a lot of things. And so I started getting into art. And that was super fun for me. It was like, oh, I'm going to try and get these new pins and try this new thing and all this other stuff. And a lot of people I knew were doing digital art. And I was like, I just got to pen to paper. Like, give me a minute or some years. And so I noticed that, like, yeah, there's this component of creation that your imagination is used for. And so I feel like the people who are having the most fun are the people who are like really tapping into their imagination on a lot of things. But then, okay, slight downside is when your imagination goes too far, aka lying to yourself, self-delusion, all that other stuff. So technically there is a cap on it. Life is all about balance and being in your homeostasis. So technically there is that other side. But I really want to like hype up this one though. It's like imagination is key. Never lose your childlike wonder, or because that's who you really are. That's like the basis of who you are. And I feel like sometimes when I talk to people, there used to be this thing where it's like sometimes someone would look at me a certain way and I'd be like, there it is. That's your childlike, your soul. I feel like when I was younger I didn't want to say soul because I feel like that was too dramatic. So I would just be like, that's like your childlike wonder or whatever. But when I really got into my spirituality, I realized I'm literally seeing your soul. I'm seeing the true pure essence of you. that is a delight, and everyone is a delight. I know there's like evil people in the world, and it might be rare to see theirs because they all evil and stuff, but like everyone has it at some point. Like we all were babies, come on now. So everyone has it, and tapping into your imagination, it doesn't matter if you do it for money or not, or just like other what we say are adult things, but like as a person, as a human being, what do you do with your imagination? How do you use it? What's your thing? Find it and do it often. That is like the biggest takeaway I want you to have today. So when we get back though, because we're going to need to get to a commercial here soon, I want to talk about what makes it pleasurable, what's the mood, and how it brings joy. And then later we'll talk about some of those tips I was alluding to earlier. So you are listening to Pleasure Moody Joy. I am Faye Goddess, and WDRB Media, the voice of the community, is the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. And we will be right back.
Hit the rock bottom, baby, crawl, crawl. I let you lick it from the ground. Cause I've been dripping for your love. You can call me that bitch. It's all sign. All I can think about is your mind. You and me in my bed at midnight. And you can call me that bitch. We can be over. And you can ride if you know her, Or we can ride and be over. You see it on your type, I know you've been all this time. So get it right to get around me. Gimme, what I want, what I need. So gimme you. Gimme, what I want, what I need. So gimme you. Pick up the phone, come on, let's talk about that thing you do, the way you move along my own. Let's get away, just me and you sometime. You can call me that bitch. You're mine to take. I wanna hear the sounds that you make, driving me crazy with the way you whine. You can call me that bitch. We can be over. And you can ride if you know her, Or we can ride and be over. You see it on your type, I know you've been all this time. So get it right to get around me. Gimme, what I want, what I need. So gimme you. Gimme, what I want, what I need. So gimme you. Gimme, what I want, what I need. So
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community. And those who are streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through the iHeartRadio, I see you. And you are listening to Pleasure Moody Joy, and I am your host, Faye Goddess. If you're just tuning in, we are discussing imagination, creativity as an adult with, sexy twists, because I first was bringing up a lot about my adventures in BDSM and how I feel like all of it is just like fun, like acting, pretend time, imagination flowing, creativity time. And so, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. And now we're going to talk about, whenever I have a topic, I want to have what makes it pleasurable, what's the mood, and how does it bring joy. So for this imagination thing, the pleasure of using your imagination can be in multiple different ways, right? Like, okay, side note, society moment though. I love how sometimes things that help everyone else comes from someone being horny, like synthetic, there we go, words, synthetic skin. It's like, how many people were using like different things for like sex toys and dildos and things like that, and then later someone was like, dude, when someone loses an arm, we could have it where we put the fake skin on there, like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh wait, how does that tie in? But technically people were really working on this anyways. Like, y'all can just like talk to each other and get that done, right? Okay, which happened. And so I feel like, don't super quote me on that, but like, that's the funny thing about humans, right? To me, I love that about us. Okay, because both of those things are going to help people, even though some people might frown upon because of whatever societal norms we have about sex, which is so funny because in America, it's like sex sells, but at the same time, you can be demonetized on YouTube for talking about it too much. Yeah, so anyways, before I go on a rant about that, I know that there is a push and pull with it, and I think the best example would be like movie ratings, like what gets a PG-13 versus a rated R versus an NC-17. One of my favorite movies is called This Film Will Not Be Rated, and at first it just is showing you like side by side movies that were rated R versus PG-13, and showing you like in other countries, like European countries, anything with sex would be like a PG-13, but stuff that was like violent was a rated R, versus in America violence was PG-13 and like the sex was rated R. But then at the irony, same moment, we love a good throw a love story in like anything, right? Oh, is there going to be a romantic lead, all that kind of stuff. So it's like we still have it where they're there, but technically our views on it is this, but then there's like all the, think of extended cuts back in the day when we had DVDs and you would get like an extended cut of something because like the extended cut is like NC-17. But what you saw was the PG-13, and there's like, sometimes there's dubs in movies, you can tell like your mouth is mouthing F, but you said darn, or instead of like other things. So it just reminded me of that, right? Like even technically on here, I'm not supposed to cuss, right? So it's like, oh yeah, technically, like, what words can I use that means something else? And so I remember I was watching like a bunch of YouTube videos, and I saw how other people would do it, and it was like hilarious just seeing the different type of ways like people skirt around talking about something that is sexual, but not saying it. So like one thing was like about Final Destination, the movie, and so there are apparently books that go along with it, and in one of the books, like someone was getting See, now I'm like, can I even say it? But anyways, now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to say what he said. So he was like, oh, there was a service worker there while he was driving named Candy. And so I was like, oh, once he said Candy, I was like, oh, prostitute. Like, duh. Like, I was like, oh, and then, oh, in the car, I get it. And so, but why do I get it? And it's like, I get it because I've been trained to understand what those words mean when he put them together. That's what a societal norm is, right? Even I might not agree with it, but I know it when I see it. And so a lot of times that's something that really annoys me about things. It'll be like, okay, so is it cool or not? Like, can we talk about the sex or not? Feels like a double standard. Oh, because it is. Right. Okay. So when it comes to imagination, I feel like that's the same thing in sex. If you have an imagination, you're usually open to most stuff, like doing things, trying things out. The same way you nerd out on other stuff, you're nerding out on sex. I feel like, I used to joke, like, I feel like nerds probably have like all the best sex. Anyways, but I don't want to like make that a thing. Don't quote me, please don't. But yeah, it's just like, but I think it's because I noticed the overlap between like people who do things like BDSM or are polyamorous, but then also like sci-fi. You know, those groups like fall into some fun Venn diagrams. Because I've been somewhere where I was there for like a poly group meetup, a polyam, I should say, yeah. And it was really cool because it was 3 levels. It was like people who maybe have been non-monogamous or polyamorous for like a few years or maybe a few months. And so a question that's just like a general question. And then the second question was like, okay, you've been probably doing this like 5-10 years, because we're talking about some realness, okay? And then the third question was like, oh, you definitely like decade or so on, because the question was just talking about like kids and living together and like people who they're very open about their non-monogamy with their children versus people who are kind of more closed about it. Like the children do not know what is going on. They just know that these other people live in their house and they're just their aunt and uncle. It's like, no, that is not your aunt and uncle. That is, you know, what is it? Like polyfidelity going on. Where the 2 couples are switching. Dude, that's why we live in the same house. Thank you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've met people like that. And I love that people have so many different formations of how they lay out their non-monogamy. So the non-monogamy umbrella has so many things in there, like polyamory, polygamory, polyandry. Oh goodness, there's so many. And then there's like relationship anarchy is in there. I mean, there's so many cool things that people are doing. And I realize it's like, because there can be something that you think is a societal norm that you need to also be following that might not work for your life. And it can cause you distress. And with all this mental illness going on with people, I think a lot of that leads to that, right? If you're grown up, if you're taught like, oh, things are supposed to be a certain way, and then your life doesn't look like that, then you think that you're not doing well. You could be failing at life because, oh, we're not supposed to be doing that this time. And if you really look at reality, if you look at meeting people, you're more likely to see how people actually act versus like how they act in movies or how the media reacts to things, all that type of stuff, right? But as we increasingly move to being on devices most of the time, it is easier for certain ideals to continue to prevail and be internalized by. So yeah, so noticing that like one of the reasons why it's a pleasure that you really need to give yourself is because I also believe in pleasure activism, right? And how pleasure is in direct conflict with someone else trying to control you, right? If I'm supposed to be working and I go masturbate and then do something else, and now I have a smile on my face, like, that's my business, technically, right? Unless you're on company dime, then it's like, okay, they're kind of their business. But like, me making sure that, like, oh, but yeah, I do that in the morning before I go to work because I know I'm going to be feeling great all day. I, got one out early. Then that could be a thing. It's counteracting that you should be run down by your hard-trodden world and working is so hard and hustle culture is so stressful. Like, you being not stressed out really doesn't lead to anything good for you. But people love doing that. I feel like in the workspace, in the certain office jobs I've been in, there is such a thing about like creating tension of like, oh, this thing is due, this project we're all working on. Oh, hurry up, everyone, hurry up, faster. It's just like, what is going on? Stop asking me to do things quicker. Like, I am going as quickly as I am going. You're not gonna move me. So, I don't know. So maybe that's why I'm a little biased on that, because I'm definitely that person sometimes. But there are things I can do quickly. And so that's the thing with like people in general I've noticed. It's like, there are certain areas where you're doing stuff with a quickness, right? Versus things that you need a little more time on. And that's okay. We all have those areas of our lives where you need more time, because to compute everything that you're computing in your brain, it needs some time. And so why? Because your imagination might not be used to doing that or doesn't enjoy doing that. So it takes a little more work. Right? Doesn't mean you can't do it, just taking a little more time to have actual attention to detail. Because what, you want it rushed, So that's like a long, convoluted way to say why you need pleasure. But yeah. Yeah, it's super pleasurable to make sure that you're using your imagination. And you can do it in literal ways, right? Like, if you don't watch porn and you just think about sexy things when you're having your time with yourself, right? See, there's a way of saying that without saying that. See, I can do it too. Yeah. Okay. So, oops. Okay. So I was thinking that when moving on to like, what's the mood? I feel like comes to imagination, you can use all the moods, which is why I like using Moody. When you're angry, some people might punch a pillow. Some people might need to dance. Some people might need to like yell at a stuffed animal. I don't know. They do things. And right? Like, what's your thing? I love in the movie Enemy of the State when Will Smith is like, when I'm angry, I blend. And so he was talking about his blender. So he was so mad that someone stole his blender. Because he's like, when he's angry, he goes and makes like smoothies. So, and I'm like, that makes sense. You get the knife out, you get to cut stuff up. And then you can put it in there. And then when it blends, it's like all loud. And everything's getting crushed. And it's like, crushing up all the stuff. Getting some of that anger out. It's vibrating a lot. I don't know. There's things happening. There's movement. So I felt that. I was like, oh yeah, that's so smart. Like, so whatever your thing is to get out the anger, right? And so same thing with sadness, right? Like, some people might write a sad song or a poem or draw something and it'd be fun and abstract or beautiful and exact. Oh, what am I rhyming? Okay, anyways, here we go. So I just realized it. So I'm thinking like, yeah, the mood can be any of the moods. If you're happy and you want to put all the rainbows everywhere, okay, maybe you're not a rainbow person. You like clean lines. And you're like, actually, I want this thing. Do that. Do your thing, okay? And when it comes to like creation of things and your imagination, like just let that soar. Like see where it takes you. The only thing is then, you know, what's the opposite? Or the sad end of the stick. Okay, when people ruminate too long on something, worrying, doubt, these types of words, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you might not want to be using your imagination on, because you can blow things out of proportion in your mind before you even see someone. Like, now I'm so angry, or now I'm sadder, you know, it just pulled you further into that abyss. And that's when people say, okay, well, now it's time for coping mechanisms, things that you know that are much more healthier for you to do. So I would say healthy coping mechanisms. Something healthier you can do, where you can use that as that outlet that you need, that you won't fall too deeply further into the thing, and then it's distressing you. So I'm like, okay, so it can be all the moods, but let's not fall too long in the mood with it. Getting balance, right? And then for joy, I feel like I've already been bringing up what the joy is, but yeah, the joy of like doing it in the first place. So like the actual creating of it, but then also once it's complete, like enjoying what your creation, what you have done. I feel like that's super important. And I think like that's a lot of times why people think they do the thing, right? It's like, well, for the joy of it, right? And because the joy helps overcome any of the times where it didn't really work out, or you were doing something really difficult that needed to support the thing that brings you joy. So I know a friend of mine who goes to a lot of conventions, right? And they sew like all of their outfits for these conventions. And so if you ask that person, would they stop going to conventions for the few times they've pricked their finger with the needle? I highly doubt it. Right? Like they're not gonna be like, yeah, I got a thumbtack. Like, you know what I mean? They're not gonna be like, nah, I just ain't gonna go no more. Like, I'm tired. I've been bleeding. I poked myself too many times making these clothes. Like, no. The joy just helps just null and void that stuff, right? So yeah, so using your imagination fun, that person gets to make up fun costumes from their favorite anime or whatever. And so that's the other thing. You might not be a person who creates the story, but if you're a super fan who wants to create an outfit that looks exactly like the character, you still didn't have to use creative imagination to come up with the character and do all that other stuff. All you had to do was just follow the guidelines of the thing, but put your own spin on it, put your stank on it, you know? So even if you're not like super imaginative, there's still ways that you can do that. And so it's like, you know, fan fiction, right? Like, I didn't say you got to go write some fan fiction, but you can if you want to, and make that a part of your life normally, right? So that's my PSA on that. Okay, so it's definitely been time for a commercial break. So don't go anywhere. This is still the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back for this commercial break.
Pay close attention. Don't listen to me from now. George will be flying this one. And it's anyone's guess how he does. This is the right and wrong universe. Taking me in full bloom. Fireball, careful with that there. See what you made me do. I must be dreaming on.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and to those who are live streaming through free TuneIn radio app and those from the iHeartRadio. You're listening to Pleasure Moody Joy, and I am Faye Goddess. And if you haven't been listening so far, I'm talking about imagination, creativity as an adult, some other sexy ways of doing that, right? So I brought up BDSM earlier about how that's very creative, LARPING, super creative, imagination. And then I brought up in the last one, what is some ideas on what makes it pleasurable for you? What is the mood or moods? And joy, how does it bring joy? So now we're gonna be getting close to the end of the show. So I want to end on what's a takeaway? Like, you listen to me, go on my little rants and stuff. And thank you if you're still tuned in and you were here from the beginning. Okay, thank you. Confetti for you. And so I wonder sometimes if scheduling in something always works, right? So some people would say in time blocking, you can do I go to work and I do this, I have to go grocery shopping, whatever, errands, whatever. But then when do I have time for my imagination time, right? What is your me time? What is your unwinding? What is the thing? And I feel like if I was going to use TV shows, I used to always really like in cop procedural shows like NCIS. Everyone knew that Gibbs goes home and works on his boat. And he's building this boat in his basement for years, just for years. And the only reason I thought about it because I was watching Battlestar Galactica. And I noticed, oh, look at Adama. He got the boat in a bottle, which is perfect because they're in space, which is kind of like their life. It's like, oh, you have the last of humanity and just a few spaceships. And you're just roaming through space, hoping the Cylons don't get you. Anyways, so it's like, oh, a ship in a bottle. But his ship was in his basement. And yeah, so I just thought those were such random things to be into. But it's their thing, right? And so it made me think about as you get older, you really fall more even into yourself when you let go of what other people think you're supposed to be doing, basically. That's why a lot of people will say who you are, you'll always revert back to it. So you should really figure out who that is. And it's yeah, that's why. Because if you like knitting, trust me, when you're older, you're going to knit like crazy. Why? Because you're going to be because it's my thing. I spent my whole life and I just like knitting, it's my thing. And so, and then they have some other things. They might like to dance. They might like to play darts. We don't know. But everyone has their stuff. So that's why I still feel it's scheduling time if you can, if you're not already. If you already are doing this, I'm proud of you. Good job. Keep doing that. Keep being you. Okay? Because you understand what I'm saying. So all this is just preaching to the choir. But for those who aren't doing it, y'all come get on this train. Come get on this train. This is what you need to be doing. We need the imagination. We need the pretend play. So one thing I like to do sometimes, I actually found some notes from almost 8 years ago when I was in college. It was crazy. Where I was doing self-monitoring. And so when you self-monitor, it's basically in psychology, it's figuring out your baseline. So if you ever want to change something about yourself, you have to know what you're working with. So you basically unjudgmentally check off things that you do. So you can have it as small as 5 things or as long as 20 things. But you can get a piece of paper, go 1 to 30 on the piece of paper, and then draw lines. And at the top, you put what the thing is. So if you want to see if you're drinking 4 glasses of water a day, if you're having sex, if you're playing games, you can even put mundane things to help you to just see how that looks, brushing your teeth, going to work. But anything you really want to notice how often you do something. So talking to your friends on the phone, like not texting them, but talking on the phone. I think that's a really good one. So things like that. And so bullet journals later became a big thing. And I was in the bullet journals because it was so easy to make the lines and do the thing. But I used to do those all the time. And so you just check what you're doing for like 2 weeks to a month. And afterwards, you kind of look at like, oh, I do this more often than I thought. I do this not as often as I thought. And so from there, you can say, well, I noticed that this one particular thing I do 3 times a week. I want to make it once a week. But this other thing I did twice a month, and I want to get it to once a week. Right? You can make those plans once you see what you actually do. But a lot of times the stuff that if you feel some type of way about it, like I can't believe I don't do this more often, or that I'm doing this often, whatever, right? Either one, because that's where you're having a little bit of a self-delusion, lying to yourself moment, which a lot of us have it. It helps us get through life. That's why we even have it. Because I think about sometimes like, imperatively as humans, why do we need certain things? That's kind of why. It's like it was helpful at some point. So sometimes when it was really hard being out in the world and the surroundings, then some stuff would happen. And so people would have to tell themselves a pretty story to get out of it, that kind of thing. Or the idea that like certain gods and goddesses of certain mythologies are really just like some really cool people who did some really cool stuff, but then over time people forgot the exact history and added stuff, because we've played that game telephone. You tell the story, you tell the next person, it goes around the room, and that last person sometimes is not the same anymore. The story has changed. So it's like, no, those are people, they did stuff. It's just like that was hundreds of years ago, and we really played up what they did in like, more dramatic or exaggerated things. Like, it's like people who feel like that. So technically I feel like, let me get back to that point, self-monitoring, it helps with saying what you are actually doing versus what you think you're doing. Because sometimes we can either think we're doing really bad in something or much better than we're actually doing something, just because we're not being honest with ourselves. So it does help you kind of look at that. And that's when you can have a time to like forgive yourself, understand, give yourself some grace for what you're not doing that great, and then be grateful and joyful about the things that you are doing well, right? And on that, I feel like I should leave it on that one. But I need to bring up that next week or the week after that, I might be having some people on. So that will be fun. And I'll just do co-hosts sometimes. Not necessarily like a guest and I'm interviewing them. I like the idea of just like, now we're both talking. We're having a conversation instead of me just ranting at you. Even though that's fun too, and I like doing that, and maybe some of y'all enjoy it, who knows. But if you do, let me know. Do that on the Instagram at Pleasure Moody Joy. And remember to check us out next Tuesday at midnight. And because it's midnight, it means like that morning, Tuesday. We'll be talking about some switchiness and some other things. So please remember to connect with me by going to wdrbmedia.com, click on the radio show tab, and then go to my page from there. Also, if you want to be a guest on the show or you want free advertising, please call me at 336-303-8877 or email me at pleasuremoodyjoy@gmail.com. And so you're listening to Pleasure Moody Joy, and I am Faye Goddess. And so we are on WDRB Media, the voice of the community, for double the information and inspiration. Until next week, continue to be blessed And come back and see me. I love you. I love me. I love us. I love we. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Millions of girls float on that one quote, living on that last hope, on that last hope. I live my life inside a dream, only waking when I sleep. I would sell my sorry soul if I could have it all. My life is a play, is a play, is a play. My life is a play, is a play, is a play. Yeah, I've been living in the state of dreaming, living in a make-believe land, living in the state of dreaming, of dreaming, of dreaming. All I really want is to be wonderful. People in this town, they can be so cruel. I live my life inside a dream, only waking when I sleep. If I could sell my sorry soul, I would have it all. My life is a play, is a play, is a play. My life is a play, is a play, is a play. Yeah, I've been living in the state of dreaming, living in a make-believe land, living in the state of dreaming, of dreaming, of dreaming. If only you knew, my dear, how I live my life in fear. If only you knew, my dear, how I know my time is near. Yeah, I've been living in the state of dreaming, living in a make-believe land, living in the state of dreaming, of dreaming, of dreaming, living in the state of dreaming, living in a make-believe land, living in the state of dreaming, of dreaming, of dreaming. My life is a play, is a play, is a play.
Stay shocking and they only see my crew. Bass knocking, they talking. My 5 minutes take them 2 days. Stop it, what you have? Tell me, will it die with you? Impact bulletproof, so we don't got shit to prove. On my blood, but we still gon' rock the Bluetooth. Call me a dog, but he don't know that it's voodoo. Sippin' Stella, this my era, baby, it's a new groove. It's water weight in diamonds, you could say I chew with Bluetooth. I sprint no illness, I snuck up like a mistress. We squeezing like it's citrus, we ran it up like finish. They want us gone, so vicious, you on the line. I finish, it's only been a minute, so can I get a witness? OMG, I seen her on my newsfeed, like who she? Scary hour, spooky. He love me cause I'm moody. Ma, chef kiss, when I'm in it, it's a movie. Wow, yo bitch, hella gone, but she bougie.
Stay property, I breaking with the crew. With my shorty from the north who attitude on Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge, I just stack it two until I'm fat and full. I ain't never start, nigga play my card like a fool. Like a joker, like a jester, I'm Stallone. I'm Sylvester, I get both of 'em. Like a teller, I just told her. What you tell her, I say, this ain't featherweight, we got our cheese the fed away. And anything that come between us, that'll be a fatal day. Okay, I don't know if you know this or not. Like hooking the boat to a dock. She coming back over the mines. Like how we open the box. She call me babe, though I'm not. They say I'm the goddess or not, but I'ma be dope with the mob.
I seen her on my newsfeed, like who she? Scary hour, spooky.